April 16, 1985. Chadwick's Restaurant, Georgetown, Washington, D.C. Lunchtime. A low hum of voices, the clink of silverware. Busy waiters. An ordinary Tuesday. At a table by the wall, a man in a rumpled suit sips from a glass. His tie is loose. His eyes are slightly glazed. He's already had a few. Across from him sits an older, well-groomed man in a good jacket. A Soviet diplomat. A KGB officer working undercover at the embassy. Between them lies a common plastic bag, the kind you get at a supermarket. Inside are several sheets of paper. On the paper are names. All the names. Every person the CIA had recruited in the Soviet Union over the past 20 years. Every single one. GRU generals, KGB colonels, diplomats, engineers from restricted research institutes. People who, for years, even decades, risked their lives to pass secrets to America. Their names now lay in a plastic bag next to a napkin and a glass of wine. The man in the rumpled suit is not a Russian spy. He is a CIA officer, the chief of the Soviet counterintelligence unit, the man whose job it is to protect these people. His name is Aldrich Hazen Ames. This is the story of how the Soviets recruited a high-ranking CIA officer who leaked everything to them. Everything. Down to the last name. And nullified 30 years of American intelligence work. In a single lunch. 9 people from that bag would be executed. The CIA would search for the mole for 9 years. And the mole would come to work every morning, sit in the next office, and drink whiskey from a coffee cup. And now, the most interesting part. In court, he would be asked, "Why did you do it?" And he would answer, "Arithmetic." Not ideology, not a crisis of conscience, not disillusionment with America, not a KGB recruitment with blackmail and compromising material. Arithmetic. This was his logic. And when you hear it, what will frighten you isn't the scale of the betrayal, but how simple it was. Ames was 44. Divorced, in debt, drinking daily. He had a new girlfriend, Rosario, a Colombian diplomat accustomed to a good life, and with no plans to give it up. Ames, however, had nothing in his bank account, but he had something else. His position. He was the CIA's chief of counterintelligence for the Soviet Union. Every recruited agent in the USSR passed through his desk. He knew their names, their call signs, their communication channels, their addresses. He knew everything. And here's what he said in court. "I knew names that were worth millions to the Soviet side. The Soviet side was willing to pay. I had debts. That's all the math." The guy did the calculations in his head. Went to a restaurant. On April 16th, he handed over the first package, a few names. He received $50,000 in cash. He tucked it into his pocket. Finished his drink, walked out into the sunny Washington day. And this is what makes the story not a tragedy, but a farce. He liked it. He liked having money. For the first time in 44 years, he felt significant. And the price of that feeling was a plastic bag filled with other people's lives. Now listen up, because what he did next defies all logic. On June 13th, less than 2 months later, came the second meeting. And this time, Ames didn't hold back. He didn't pick and choose. He didn't bargain. He didn't weigh the risks. He handed over everything. Everyone. Every CIA and FBI agent in the Soviet Union. Over 20 names in one package. His own words from the interrogation transcript. "I decided, since I started, there's no point in being petty. And now, the names. Because behind every name in that package was a living person. Was. Past tense. Major General Dmitry Fyodorovich Polyakov, CIA, codename Top Hat, FBI codename Bourbon, a GRU general, the main intelligence directorate. He worked for the Americans for 25 years, a quarter century. Since 1961. He passed information on Soviet military plans, nuclear doctrine, weapons systems, divisional compositions, and tactical developments. Former CIA Director James Woolsey would call him the most valuable agent who ever worked for the United States. For 25 years, this man woke up every morning knowing it could be his last. Every breakfast with his wife, every conversation with his sons, every step through the GRU corridors, under cameras, among people who would execute him for what he did every Tuesday. For 25 years, he carried this burden, and then his name landed in a plastic bag on a table at Chadwick's restaurant, between a glass of wine and a bread basket. Polyakov was arrested in '86, executed in '88. He was 73 years old. He left behind 2 sons. They only learned their father had been a spy for a quarter century when the authorities came for him. Imagine that moment. A knock at the door, men in uniform, and the world you knew turns upside down. But that's not even the scariest part, because the next name in the package is worse. Adolf Georgievich Tolkachev, a Soviet engineer. He worked at the Restricted Phasotron Research Institute on airborne radars for fighter jets, air defense systems, and radar stealth technology. And here's what set Tolkachev apart from everyone else on this list. No one recruited him, no one approached him. He decided on his own. He decided the Soviet regime was doing things he couldn't live with, and he started looking for contact with the CIA. And here's a detail that makes you want to scream. 6 times. This man tried 6 times to contact American intelligence. He left notes in diplomats' cars. He approached people near the embassy. Each attempt was a risk of execution. If the KGB noticed, that was it. Family, career, life, everything gone. And 6 times, the CIA rejected him. Too good to be true. Surely a KGB provocation. Don't get involved. 6 times this man knocked on the door, risking his head, and 6 times he was told to go away. On the 7th try, they finally believed him, and he began to pass information. Data on Soviet air defense systems, characteristics of MiG airborne radars, specifications that allowed the Americans to develop electronic warfare countermeasures a generation ahead. The value of what he transmitted is estimated in billions of dollars, not millions. Billions. This man smuggled secret documents out of the Restricted Research Institute for years, in his socks, in his underwear, in special containers the CIA gave him. For years, risking his life every day. And then Aldrich Ames put his name in a bag between a napkin and a glass, collected his money, and went to look for a Jaguar. Tolkachev was arrested, executed. His wife was also arrested. Her fate remains classified. Tolkachev deserves a separate story, because this man deserves more than a paragraph in someone else's video. But for now, the other names. Because the list doesn't end. And the fates, there are even more horrible. Valery Martinov, a KGB lieutenant colonel. He worked for the FBI right in Washington, D.C., passing information about Soviet operations in America. Recalled to Moscow for consultations. Executed. Sergei Motorin, also a KGB officer, also FBI, also recalled, also executed. Leonid Polishchuk, a KGB officer working for the CIA in Nigeria. Returned to Moscow. Arrested at the airport. Executed. Boris Yuzhin, arrested. 15 years in labor camps. Survived. Oleg Gordievsky, a KGB colonel, resident in London, one of MI6's most valuable agents. He was the only lucky one. When it became clear his name had been given up, the British launched an emergency evacuation. Gordievsky was smuggled out of the Soviet Union in the trunk of a diplomatic car. Literally, in the trunk. Across the Finnish border, the others were less fortunate. 9 confirmed executions. Probably more. Some names are still classified. Each of these people entrusted their lives to America. America entrusted their names to one man. That man put them in a plastic bag and went to lunch. And now, the part that makes you want to bang your head against a wall, because by now, you know what he did. You know the names. You know the price. And now, listen to how the CIA searched for him. Starting in the fall of 1985, agents began to disappear. One by one, arrested, executed, contact lost, Dead drop, untouched. Agent missed a meeting. And this wasn't a drawn-out process. It was a collapse. Within a few months, the CIA lost practically all its people in the USSR. Imagine, you are an operations chief. You have 20 agents you've run for years. And suddenly, one is taken. A week later, another. 2 weeks later, a third. Coincidence? After the fourth, you realize? No. Someone knows. Someone knows everything. The question is, who? In Langley, they created a special group, the Special Task Force. Task, find the leak. And what do you think they did? They checked ciphers, communication channels, frequencies. They looked for a technical leak. Maybe the KGB hacked communications. Maybe wiretaps, signal interception. Maybe Soviet decryptors found the key to the ciphers. They went through everything, spent years, millions of dollars, thousands of hours of work by the best analysts, created subgroups, wrote reports, held meetings, and not once, not a single time in 9 years, did they look at the man sitting next door who had access to all the names. They didn't check his finances. They didn't look at his car. They didn't ask him a single uncomfortable question. Why? And this is where it gets most interesting, because the answer to why is scarier than the betrayal itself. Because Ames was one of their own, white, Protestant. From a CIA family, his father worked for the agency. He attended meetings, said the right things, wore the right tie. Drank? Well, many people drank. In debt? It happens. Divorced? Half the agency was divorced. He was part of the furniture. They saw him every day, and that's precisely why they didn't see him. And furniture, as everyone knows, doesn't betray. 9 years. 9 years. They searched for the mole, and not once did they look at the guy in the next office. And all that time, he continued to work for both sides. Dead drops in Washington, meetings in Bogota, transfers in Rome, when he was sent there for a posting. Over 9 years, the KGB and later the SVR paid him $4.5 million in cash, in envelopes, in dead drops, in accounts. And listen to what he did with that money, because here the story finally turns from tragedy into an unbelievable joke. He bought a house in Arlington, Virginia, for $540,000, cash, on a salary of $60,000 a year. Do you understand the scale? The house cost 9 times his annual salary. No mortgage. Cash. Next, a Jaguar. Brand new. Then home renovations. Then dental work. A new wardrobe. Rosario, remember, the Colombian diplomat, started spending as if she had a bottomless account. Designer clothes, restaurants every night. And here's a question for you, and it still bothers me to this day. The CIA, thousands of analysts, people whose profession is to notice inconsistencies. That's literally what they're paid for. And here's their colleague, who just yesterday drove a rusty Volvo, borrowed $20 for lunch, and wore the same suit for 3 days straight. Today, he arrives in a new Jaguar, moves into a $500,000 house, his wife in designer clothes, new teeth, and not one person in 9 years said, "Wait, where did the money come from?" Not one. How? How is that even possible? Let me explain. And this perhaps is the most important part of the entire story, more important than the betrayal itself. The CIA of the 80s wasn't an organization. It was a club, exclusive, elite, with its own rules. Rule number 1, our own don't betray. Rule number 2, uncomfortable questions are impolite. Rule number 3, if you're from the right family and say the right things, you won't be checked. We're gentlemen. Ames took a polygraph. Twice. Both times he sweated, was nervous, gave suspicious answers to key questions. Both times, cleared. The examiner decided, nervous type. It. Happens. Some people's palms sweat. It's their personality. Ames would later say in court, and this is a direct quote, "They just told me to breathe deeply. I breathed deeply, and they let me go." The security system of the largest intelligence agency on the planet, one deep breath. On the exhale, 9 executions. That's how the club works. Furniture isn't checked. Furniture isn't suspected. Furniture doesn't betray. Until the furniture puts all your secrets in a plastic bag. Meanwhile, outside Langley, a shockwave began. And this is almost never told. But it should be, because the scale of the disaster is seen not from within, but from without. MI6 was furious. The British had barely extracted Gordievsky, their best man in the KGB, and now they demanded an answer. Who gave him up? And why, for God's sake? Couldn't the CIA find the mole after 5 years? Allies, Germany, France, Canada, one by one began to scale back intelligence sharing with the Americans. The logic was simple and devastating. Everything passed to Langley, leaks to Moscow. Why share if it's effectively handing it directly to the KGB? Congress held closed hearings. Senators on the Intelligence Committee demanded explanations. The CIA director came to Capitol Hill and couldn't explain why his intelligence network in the USSR had been destroyed, because he himself didn't know. Inside the CIA, paranoia that paralyzed operations. Everyone suspected everyone. People stopped talking in the hallways. Operations were frozen. No new agents were recruited in the USSR anymore. Why bother? They'd be given up anyway. 30 years of work, recruitments, infiltrations, safe houses, dead drops, communication channels, evacuation systems, people who entrusted their lives to you, all nullified. Not by a bomb, not by a cyber attack, not by an army, by one alcoholic with a calculator and a plastic bag. And if you think there's no one else to hate in this story, wait, because there's another character. Rosario, Maria del Rosario, Casas Dupuy, Colombian. The second character it's convenient to forget, or to imagine as a victim. Poor woman. She was deceived. She didn't know. She knew. From a certain point, she definitely knew. Where the house came from, where the car came from, where the envelopes of cash came from after business dinners. When your husband brings home $50,000 in cash and says, "It's a bonus," and you have a diplomat's degree, you either believe it or you decide not to ask. She decided not to ask. And she didn't just not ask. She spent. With pleasure. Purposefully. Systematically. Clothes, restaurants, travel, renovations. The defense in court tried to portray her as an innocent wife. The court disagreed. 5 years in prison. Deportation to Colombia. 5 years. For complicity in the deaths of 9 people. Do the math. Roughly half a year for each person executed. General Polyakov risked his life for 25 years. Rosario received 5. Years for spending money from his blood. Arithmetic. The same arithmetic with which it all began. And now, how he was caught. And this perhaps is the most humiliating part of the whole story. He wasn't caught by the CIA. By this point, the CIA had been searching for 8 years and found nothing. 0. Emptiness. He was caught by the FBI. In '93, the Bureau finally took the case seriously. Surveillance, phone taps, and, pay attention, trash. Literally, trash. FBI agents began collecting Ames's garbage bags from his house every week. They brought them to a lab, took them apart, piece by piece, scrap by scrap, and they found a note. Torn, crumpled, discarded, but pieced back together. Instructions for a dead drop, a diagram, location, time, in Russian, in a trash bag, next to orange peels and Pizza Hut flyers. 9 years of the most massive and expensive mole hunt in the history of global intelligence, and the answer lay in a trash bag by the roadside. Such is life. February 21st, 1994. Morning. Monday. Aldrich Ames leaves his house. That same house, for $540,000 cash, on a $60,000 salary. Walks to his Jaguar. That same one, bought with money for 9 lives. Opens the door, sits behind the wheel, turns the ignition key. The starter cranks. The engine doesn't catch. Again. Silence. He releases the key. Something's wrong. He looks up at the rearview mirror. Cars. 4. 5. From all sides. Unmarked. Doors open simultaneously. Men in jackets walk toward him. Quickly. Not running, but quickly. Ames, in his own words, understood everything in half a second. 9 years. Restaurants. Packages. Envelopes. Dead drops. Polygraph. A deep breath. All of it, or none of it, flashed through his mind. He opened the door. Got out. Didn't run. Didn't resist. Looked at the FBI agent and said, "You probably want to talk to me." In the same tone he'd ordered a glass at Chadwick's 9 years earlier. Calmly. Matter-of-factly. As if all this time he had known this Monday would come someday. Rosario was arrested an hour later. At home. She was in a bathrobe. He was not allowed to see his daughter. In court, not a drop of remorse, not a shadow of regret. Not a single moment when he lowered his eyes or stumbled. They asked him, "Do you regret what you did?" He thought and answered, "No." He did not regret it. They asked him, "What about the people? About Polyakov, Tolkachev, Martinov? About the people who died because of you?" He said, "They knew what they were getting into?" As if he was the one who risked, not them. They asked him one last time, simply directly. Why? One word. Money. Not ideology. Not disillusionment with the system. Not principles. Not revenge. Not a re-evaluation. Money. Pure, naked, shameless arithmetic. From beginning to end. Life imprisonment without parole. He is still incarcerated. Federal prison, Terre Haute, Indiana. A cell 2 by 3 meters. Routine. Television. 3 meals a day. An hour of recreation daily. He is 83 years old. He is alive. The convenient version of this story is about one bad man. A traitor. Caught. Imprisoned. Evil punished. Good triumphed. A clean story. Only that's not what happened. Ames didn't hack the system. Didn't deceive the system. Didn't bypass the system. The system itself opened the door for him, handed him the keys to every lock, turned away, and for 9 years pretended that the smell of smoke wasn't a fire. It didn't check him. It didn't notice the Jaguar. It forgave the polygraph. It attributed the alcoholism to his personality. It completely overlooked a house purchased with 9 years' salary in cash, because he was one of their own. And their own don't betray. That is the real lesson of this story. Not traitors exist. That's obvious even without Ames. But this, the most dangerous hole in any system, is the unwillingness to look at your own. 9 people were executed not because Ames was clever. He wasn't clever. He was a mediocrity with a calculator. They were executed because in the gentleman's club, asking uncomfortable questions was impolite. Dmitry Fyodorovich Polyakov, top hat, 25 years, 73 years old, 2 sons. He saw the wall of the execution cellar. Adolf Tolkachev knocked on the door 6 times, saw the same wall. Aldrich Ames, 83 years old. A cell, a ceiling, a television. He is alive. They are not. Ames sold people for money. But there is a story of a man who did the exact opposite. He risked everything, not for dollars, not for ideology, but because he believed that what his country was doing was wrong. His name was Oleg Penkovsky. He came to MR6 himself. He was turned away twice. When they finally believed him, he passed data that may have prevented a nuclear war. And then he, too, was destroyed by the system. But a different system. And for different reasons. That story is next.